Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Sprague from Persimmon Health. I am a serial entrepreneur working on healthcare technology that helps more people access better quality of care. This podcast is for the movement of innovators, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and thought leaders that are advancing the American healthcare system through digital health. In this podcast, we highlight real stories of innovators and enablers of digital health, their opportunities, challenges, and learnings for innovation. We'll cover topics such as startup building and fundraising, entrepreneurship, emerging technologies, and big ideas to transform healthcare. We invite you to participate in this community, share your stories, and accelerate the movement. Thank you. We have an awesome pod. Enjoy. Leon is a serial entrepreneur, inventor, speaker, and mentor within digital health. He invented the world's first FDA-cleared wrist sensor pulse ox monitor. He has 7 U.S. patents, 40 worldwide patents, was CEO and founder of a highly successful medtech and digital health company, Oxitone Medical, one of the healthcare transformers with Startup Health, and now advises founders, startups, and established companies. Today, we're going to talk about the past, present, and future of medical devices, advice for digital health entrepreneurs, and not only around business, but around how to think about business. Leon, welcome to the pod. We got to know each other over the summer when we were on a learning mission on our side for chronic disease management and medical devices and wearables. Lucky for us, you responded to a random LinkedIn reach out for us to be able to learn more. And you dropped so many insights in our conversation that we knew we had to have you on the pod right away. So thank you for coming. Maybe, Leon, if you could briefly tell us about Oxitone and anything else you're currently working on.
First of all, I'm really very glad to be here and to talk to you guys. And thank you, Chris, for the invitation to participate in your amazing podcast. It looks like it is the second time I'm here, right? We did it before once.
Not in the podcast format, but definitely in the interview format.
Yeah, I remember. Yes. It was an extremely nice experience. So about myself, I'm living in Israel today, and I did my PhD in physics, in quantum optics, quantum electronics, quantum mechanics, quantum computing, in Weizmann Institute of Science. And then I did my PhD in laser cooling, and then I decided to join startups in Israel like engineer. So I was working in many startups. I helped to develop, and it happened that most of my job was dedicated for development of medical devices and digital health. So this way I was introduced into the medical device industry that really was amazing, and I found a lot of opportunities there, a lot of things we have to do, because this industry was here in transition mode from very old. So it's interesting because together it survived very old approach. You still have very old devices, famous. At the same time, people start to use totally new device, and there is a huge vision for the future. So in 2010, I decided to launch my own company after I got a lot of experience in this area. And it was based on my invention of the world's first FDA-cleared pulse oximetry monitor. It became world's first after 7 years after invention. But I started to develop a unique device. All people were busy with heart rate monitor for wellness, and I was dedicated to develop something that is beyond just heart rate. It's a pulse oximetry, and to give people capabilities to have the very comfortable measurements without any fingertip probe that is really bulky, disturbing. And most important, we had to do it on a medical grade level. That's very difficult. That's first time in our world it happened. And I invented totally new technology. It's not totally new, it's based on the old approach, but new new placement, new configuration, new measurements. It means we try to use ulnar bone on the wrist, like very unique place where you can measure in a high accuracy level patient vital signs, much better accuracy than any other place, including fingertip. And you can compare accuracy with forehead, for example. So the main issue that bone enables to clean and to guide the signal, optical signal, in a way that we have very good signal, and still this technology opens huge capabilities with respect to or relative to conventional technology that wellness devices are using. And by the way, today only 3 medical devices receive FDA for pulse oximetry, and it looks like today Oxitone is only wrist-worn device on the market that you can buy and use.
Right. No, thank you for that, Leon. And yeah, I'm curious as to when you were inventing Oxitone, what were the design goals that you had in mind? So, for example, you mentioned something that is wearable on the wrist, so maybe perhaps people will actually wear it. I'm just curious, when you were going in, what were you thinking about? As in, this medical device is going to be better adhered to, or it's going to be just better than what's on the market and what you were looking for?
Amazing question, because this question just follows all our development, self-development, and company development in understanding of the market and what we have to deliver. So definitely in the beginning, we thought we wasn't so much equipped with knowledge and experience. So we thought, okay, we're doing something new. We eliminate bulky things. We deliver something very comfortable. People will start to use it immediately. No, it didn't happen. So we had to think about, so we thought that if we will do something between wellness and medical, so it looks like wellness, but it's medical, it will win. No, it didn't. So we will talk about it later. But we did, and I personally did, all possible mistakes that is possible to do. That's why it took about 7 years, 8 years to develop this innovation and commercialize it. And still, we have a lot of feedback, and we're working on totally new device that incorporates all what we were learning during our adventure. But actually, you are right. So it was very difficult, and we learned a lot during design. And even I went to Harvard Business School to learn design thinking, specifically to understand fundamentals of design and bringing product to the market.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right, Leon. I do want to unpack that Oxitone journey and those learnings quite a bit later. Understand what made you understand that you needed to go back to school and study something new, like, for example, design thinking from Harvard. But maybe so people can understand that journey more, we can back up and talk about a little bit of just defining what medical devices are. Now, you are the inventor of the world's first FDA-cleared pulse oximetry monitor on the wrist. And so we were thinking, who is the best person to ask questions about medical devices in the past, present, and future, and also what's needed to bring them to market, for example, FDA clearance. So my first question for the audience and for me is, what is a medical device, and what are the different types of medical devices?
It's a very tough question, and today there is no such a pure line between medical and wellness devices like it was 10 years ago, for example. Thanks for Apple and Fitbit. So, but actually, medical device, it is not what received FDA, like all people think that, okay, you have FDA, you are a medical device now. No, it's not. Medical device from physician's point of view, it's not device that only has FDA. So it's not enough. You have to prove that your medical device is accurate, is you can trust the data, and it has a very good repeatability. So you have to qualify any medical device, even if this device has FDA, because FDA check for safety. But if you want to deliver accuracy and all this stuff around, it's important to go to the field, to the hospital, to make pilots, and to prove through incredible number of pilots and articles to prove that specifically this device is good for specific content of interest for healthcare. And this is most important. And some physicians think even, okay, I can use Apple. It's not medical device, but through thousands of validation, it works okay. So I can use it. Why not? That's why I said there is no clear line between medical device and wellness. But even more what happened, because I was dedicated to build medical device, and suddenly I found myself in competition with wellness devices, even among physicians. Interesting. So what happened? You remember I said in the beginning, I thought if I make design like wellness and I will use it like medical, I will win from both parts. No, you have to focus on your specific area. And what happened? All these big wellness companies, corporations, moved specific medical device into specific niche. It's a big niche, but niche of chronic diseases and high-risk chronic diseases, where we met Holter monitor, for example, who is for 50 years there in this niche, never get out of this. Now all these medical devices like Oxitone were just moved, squeezed into this niche. That's why we decided in our new generation of devices to remove, for example, screen. Who needs screen? It's a medical device for screening. They don't have to watch on device. People are very sick, they don't need it. So this is what, it's a trend today, I would say.
Yeah, no, and I'm hoping you can comment on the difference in perhaps rigor between wearables and medical devices. So I recently got my first wearable Garmin watch, and it was amazing up until the point I worked out for the first time. And I hit the treadmill hard, practically out of breath, heart racing, and yet my heart rate was still showing 95 beats per minute, which absolutely defeated the purpose for me knowing that I'm in that orange zone of 140 to 150 beats per minute for my age. And which by taking my pulse, I was actually over. And frankly, I don't know if that bodes well for the pulse ox that is also on the same watch. But yeah, I was wondering if you have any comment on these popular off-the-shelf wearables and whether they have the rigor accuracy to really be used for disease management.
This is exactly the issue that what you mentioned now, because they don't care about accuracy. They don't care about it. You decide whether you're going to use it or you don't have to use it, because it doesn't influence on your health. And by the way, wellness devices for healthy people. So I'm healthy. Why do I need pulse oximetry? Because my oximetry doesn't change, never change. If it change, I have to go to the hospital and I will receive medical device like Oxitone. But okay, I am healthy. I want to prove myself every day that I'm healthy. Good. And you decide if you are good with this accuracy or not good, so you have some bias to these devices. Okay, I accept it, not so accurate, but it gives me some understanding that I'm healthy. I'm happy to understand that I'm healthy. I have a lot of dopamine because I'm healthy. Great. Go. And in medical device, we cannot afford to give you non-accurate data. So what we do, we eliminate any measurements if patient is moving. We cannot give you wrong data. So we got FDA for patient who is not moving. And we're using for patient who is not moving. So we have on our accelerator at some point just switch off all measurements if patient is moving, because we cannot rely on whether device decide to give us good data or not good data. We have to eliminate any risk. And by the way, our patients are not moving so much because it's very sick patients. So the difference, again, the third difference between medical device and wellness, that it's specifically dedicated for very sick patients and very focused on specific measurements. For example, if I have COPD patients or sleep apnea patients or CHF patients, it has very specific approach how to measure, and we claim it for FDA.
Right. Yeah, no, got that. And then I think what's interesting about wearables, though, is that it's getting people like me to actually wear a device more or less at all times. And it's almost like this flipped classroom where before clinicians will request that a particular patient with a particular disease adhere to an advice, a device. But now there's a little bit of this counterflow of patients that are bringing in their Apple Watches and Fitbits, et cetera, and hoping that they have some medical use for the clinician. But maybe to expand on the difference, if you can walk us back through medical devices and really the past and the present, and just how they arose, and then also for that first flow of being pushed out by programs from, let's say, a clinician, how are they adopted and who pays for them?
Oh, very interesting. But before, I would like to I just recalled very interesting meeting with Google five years ago. They were working on their own watch. You know, it didn't happen, but they were working. And I had a meeting with guys from Google, Variety, specifically, and they said, we have medical device, this one, that we're using in our clinical trials. I said, okay, does this have FDA clearance? No. So why it's medical device, you said? He said, no, it's medical device because we're using for medical use, for clinical trials. Okay, I was very surprised about such approach, and finally they bought Fitbit. Okay, this is the story. About your question, I don't know if many people know that the first medical device, first watch, first wearable medical device happened to be designed in 1695. In 1695.
Okay.
1695. It's a 400 years ago. Yeah, something like this. 300 years ago. So this is what happened. And Sir John Foer, who in 1707, if I remember, just released the first essay about how it works. So they created so-called pulse watch. It's really a stopwatch, and they developed counting called today BPM, beat per minute. They developed. And who realized it? It was engineer associate of Newton. His name was Samuel Watson. And he realized this watch, and they start to sell to physicians and use it. So it's a stopwatch that enable using two hands to count the beat per minute at wrist. Interesting, right? And just in 200 years, it became widespread. And by the way, these guys also created all these devices we're using in sports, stopwatches, alarms, all these stuff. They created this. But in our time, the first wearable device was just Holter. Holter monitor. The first Holter monitor was commercialized in 1962. And people start to use it everywhere. And this was the only wearable device. This is the first wearable. And first wearable was medical. And in 90s, if you remember, Garmin in 1990s released the first device with ECG here. Not medical, wellness, with ECG. Some platter here and something like this. And just, so I think Apple was the last, not least, but last who, who developed ECG monitor on wrist. And so it's interesting. First it was medical devices, wearables. Then it became wellness wearables. And then today it's back to medical wearables, but for specific niche we were talking about before. So this is the interesting history. And how it will continue, I think wearables are very important in some applications. But it looks like all the trend, a year ago I told that the trend is to implantables. But now I understand that people don't want to use implantables. It's a point of trust. It's a point of security. So it looks like it will be very difficult to penetrate into the market. So I think the future in non-contact measurements through the camera, like Israeli company, amazing company, Bina AI, they developed technology that enable to measure all vital signs that any wearable device, even beyond this, from the camera of their smartphone. So I think this is the future today. From the cameras, some sensors under the mattress. This is this is the trend for the measurements of patients' vital signs today, and it's mostly wearable. Should be wearable device. It's not wearable. It should be medical devices. Most of the cases.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So more of a ambient monitoring. And I think, yeah, like along the lines of, I guess we'll find out more of when you were theorizing that something on the wrist would have better adherence than something that is more intrusive. The holy grail of this sounds like you don't have to wear anything at all. It's not a wearable. It's just a part of your environment that is monitoring. And I think everyone that's in the industry of devices, patient engagement, has understood that the challenge is not just creating a device that is accurate and very useful for a disease, but then the counterpart of that is actually making sure that patients will use it. And patients themselves, right, they don't wake up wanting to be engaged. They don't want another thing to put on. I went with Garmin because I knew I could charge it once every 10 days instead of once a night with Apple, and I knew I would never do that. So I think that level of friction for adherence is what you're touching upon, or else people aren't going to be able to adopt it. Eventually, like today, I didn't sleep with my Garmin watch because I didn't find it useful for exercising. But yeah, is that what you're talking around? Is that all of the points of this remote physiological monitoring? It only matters if people are actually being monitored. They're actually engaging and using the thing. So if you don't put any steps in front of people to be able to use it, you set it up around them, then hopefully that is this ideal future state.
Yeah, this is, you're right. So all this stuff is all about data. It doesn't matter how you generate this data. It could be wearable, it could be ambient, everything what you want. It could be implantable. But most important, how you generate the data. And data became, with development of such devices, became is very complicated. It became multidimensional data. By the way, Oxitone delivers multidimensional data, more than 10 dimensions, 10 vital signs. And how to manage all these multidimensional data, how to build algorithms that enable to identify and even predict, based on historical data, what happened to the patient and how to avoid any complication. So here we're talking about, again, back to difference between wellness and medical devices. Wellness device is good for preventing disease and chronic disease. Medical device is for preventing complication. So these two different domains of patient management, and there is a clear understanding of these differences. So we're talking about, in both cases, we're talking about data. We're talking about events. So medical device, very good, like Holter, for screening. And screening gives you understanding about some events that happen to patient. But again, here is very important how assessment, we're talking about endpoint, yeah, assessment of endpoint that you're waiting for a patient outcome. And how to qualify this specific device for this specific endpoint. Because, for example, all medical devices were working in the hospital. Now you take it, same vital signs, and move it to the home. You know, when you are coming to the clinics and get measurements of blood pressure, my blood pressure goes up to, I don't know, 60 points. People immediately try to put me into the hospital immediately. And I said, I'm okay. It's because I'm in clinics. I want to run out from here and I will be okay. And this is what happens. We have to understand what's the difference from point of healthcare context, what we're going to measure, how to qualify a device. And if, for example, but in our case, we wearables, we are in the much better situation because we have many vital signs, multidimensional, and we can find correlation. And this correlation gives us more trust and more accuracy. Accuracy of what? Not vital signs itself, assessment of the endpoint based on correlation, on the pattern of this patient. So we have the pattern. And pattern is much more rich than taking one separate vital signs and measure blood pressure or measure blood oxygen saturation. So if you have the pattern and you apply algorithm, you apply machine learning, you have much rich data, much complicated data, but much accurate data to deliver final resolution and understand and qualify this product for specific endpoint.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And just to break into Oxitone for a second, it goes much beyond SpO2, but can infer or correlate things like sleep tracking, fall detection, respiratory rates, and more. Is that what you're talking around that you've been able to do with Oxitone, is correlate data that it was invented for with these other things that it would be very useful for and that people like me are interested in, which is more accurate sleep tracking, for example, more accurate heart rates. I guess just a little bit of how you've approached that at Oxitone.
Yeah, because we identified that this technology enables much more than we were thinking in the beginning. You know, here is very interesting. You know that any invention become invention when you recognize this idea. So if you design or devise idea, this coming out of the context. If you recognize idea within the context, this idea has a huge chance for success. So we recognize this idea, we took this idea from the context, and we developed technology that finally enabled to measure today blood pressure, for example. Even more, we decided to focus today on prenatal care because our technology, we call it trans-elimination ulnar-bone technology, and applicable to any bone in our body, enables to measure fetus heart rate and heart rate variability. And we are starting pilot about it. And this is a huge breakthrough. It's a revolution. Because today, for the last 30 years, it wasn't a big advance in prenatal monitoring. There are clinics, women go there, but pregnancy monitoring at home is not advanced at all. There are some devices, very non-accurate home ultrasound devices, for example, very not accurate. We check it. Or some big things that women should, like big belts to do it. But now we come from the wrist and we have fetus heart rate, mother heart rate, blood pressure, heart rate variability, that is stress, and sleep, position of the woman. Is it to understand which position is the best and which position is the worst for the baby? A lot of it's revolution, and this is our direction today, and all because we have very clean and very unique signal from our technology. And this comes from the single sensor.
Got it. Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, as you're designing for prenatal, I'm going to be curious as to how much different characteristics, for example, form factors start to matter or not. And I bring that up because another entrepreneur we've met named Chalisa, she invented a wearables company, but one of her big learnings was with women how much style and customization mattered to her target user base, and became ultimately the selling point. So I'm really curious as you go into this, if there is, these completely non-medical considerations that go into your thought around the design of the device. So not about convenience necessarily, not about what it does, although of course those are first and foremost, but how does it look and can I personalize it for me? And then when people understand that I'm wearing this thing that I am pregnant and, but I'm also representing some part of myself with a form of fashion. So that'll be, I don't know if you've even thought about it.
Quite easy, yeah. With pregnancy, it's quite easy because everybody sees that she's pregnant. So she doesn't have to hide anything.
Right.
All right, so it's much easier. Definitely, we have to think about colors. We have to think about design, but it's much easier than with elderly chronic patients. We told in the beginning that some community of elderly patients, elderly people, chronic disease people, it's a great market for us. And what happened when we came to this community and tried to sell? People 80 years old, even 90 years old, in community, they create networks. They have love with each other. They don't want to look old with some crazy medical device on the wrist. And they said, no, we don't buy it because we are going to do sport, because we have girls here, also 80, 90 years old. We're going to look young, we're going to look healthy, and you want me to wear this medical device. No, it doesn't happen. One of our mistakes, by the way, in market definition. So, but with what we check with pregnant women, they're really interested because they're conscious more about baby and their health than about how they look like.
Okay, got it. Yes, and so getting back to the practice or business side of medical devices, so one is the business side. So for devices that are recommended as part of a treatment care plan to a patient, who ultimately is paying for that? And what are the different business models if I'm creating a medical device startup?
Yeah, in medical device, mostly B2B. In consumer device, wellness devices, people buy it. In medical, B2B. In Germany, for example, people going to die, but not to pay by themselves. So this is what happens. So people get used to, so our society just make people get used to somebody pay for their disease management. And this complicates and increase the cost of the whole healthcare. That's why it's very difficult to change something, because too many stakeholders in this market and try to do something. You know what I learned in the business? What really works is only one-step decision. You don't have to think about 5 steps ahead, because you create a lot of uncertainties. You have to think about one step ahead. And that's why I designed something we call it backward, that I teach my students and entrepreneurs about backward planning, because this gives the opportunity to see yourself in the future. But it doesn't eliminate, but it eliminates complexity. Because if you think about several steps ahead, you create a lot of complexity in your thinking and in implementation as well. So it's very important to think one step ahead, and then to recognize what happens and to reevaluate. So you know how it looks like. You take background data, you think about this data and extract what is important, then you evaluate what is important, and then you decide, make conclusion. This is the line of thinking that is important for entrepreneur to succeed. A lot of techniques we can talk about for days, but this is one of the main techniques how to think.
Got it. Yeah, and I do want to unpack that quite a bit more later. Yes, but so for medical devices, you mentioned most of them are B2B as opposed to me going to buy a Garmin or someone going to buy an Apple, right? That is direct to consumer. But for B2B, who can be the B, right? And what are they buying it for? So for example, distinguishing between payers or health systems, and in particular for someone who knows they can create a device but needs to get it off the ground with a actual pilot customer, who could that be?
A lot of companies in wearable area started from pharma, because pharma pay directly.
Okay.
And they need using medical devices for assessment of the endpoint for their drug and therapeutic development. So this is the most important market. For example, one of the greatest company, Bioformulas, unicorn, they started from the pharma. And a lot of companies started from the pharma. Because again, no complexity, you know who pay, you sell them, that's all. When you come to healthcare area, it's much more complicated. You can get payment from durable equipment agency. You can get payment directly from hospital. It depends. During the pandemic, for example, it happened many times when hospital make purchasing within the 3 days. You know, usually you go through the budget assessment, all this stuff. It takes about a year to sell. It depends when you start to sell, but it takes about a year to sell to the hospital. And during pandemic, they bought this for 3 days. That's amazing. So this is what happened. It doesn't happen anymore today. So it's really very, very difficult to estimate. For example, we sell to a lot we sell to and collaborate with research. Universities who need some research, so they receive grant and they pay directly and very quickly. And they use our product for their research, and we customize sometimes what kind of data they are going to receive specifically for their patient. It could be CHF, it could be sleep apnea. Another business is sleep apnea clinics. So they pay immediately as well, but they don't need a lot of items. So it's quite not so good. Hospitals are the best, but it's quite complicated to enter into this. So again, we try to mostly try to sell, and also we're using distributors, and we're planning to close a big agreement with one of the biggest distributor in healthcare in the United States, and we think this will accelerate sales because distributor has access to all clinics, and we don't have to look for some champion there and spend time on sales, on structuring the sales there.
Right. Yeah, and you're mentioning some of the complexities of going direct to the health system. Is that what you were talking around? Is the complexity of navigating and defining your internal champion and then getting a pilot signed off on, and just the length of time and grit that it takes to actually get to use something in a clinical setting? Or are there other types of complexities that you're talking about?
It's a multidimensional complexity. We're talking about when you have to start to talk to them because they close their budget maybe in September. So if you come to sell to the hospital in October, they say, okay, you're late, come in April. Come to us in April. So sometimes it happens. Another complexity is even on a personal level. Just imagine you are working like a manager of purchasing department. And some company came to you and say, okay, I have something. I went through innovation department. By the way, innovation department specifically designed to filter companies out of the hospital, not to help, to filter out companies. This is my takeaway. And so you come to the purchasing department and say, okay, take it. And personally, what do you think? I'm here, I have very good salary, I gonna grow here, and if I will buy and they will disappear as a small startup, I will lose. Okay, I did something wrong. I bought something that doesn't exist. So it will have a huge impact on my career. I don't want to talk to this company, even they bring incredible device. Or once it was amazing experience. So I was working with one physician in one of the biggest medical systems in the United States. And I came to another department of this medical system, to another physician and said, look, I was working with this physician. He tried our product. He liked it. He bought it. I think you need it as well. And he answered, whom you were working with? I don't want to hear about this guy. I will never buy something what he is using. So everything happens even, so you go for whole level, from budget level, from personal understanding, personal mind of people. So this comes to entrepreneurship. What is it, entrepreneurship? You have to understand all this complexity and manage it and control it. And how to control it. This is what we have to learn.
Right. Yeah, no, it's super interesting because in the technology space for many SaaS products, so let's just call them, let's say Slack, Figma, GitHub, a very viable strategy is to go in with the end user that may not be the CIO of the company that makes those decisions, but get early adoption and a lot of usage and a lot of internal evangelism from a small user base. And then the next thing you know, 6 months later, you have 500 licenses on Slack. So it is very much that grassroots bottom up adoption that can work. And what I'm hearing is, there's a whole lot of risk for someone. There's no risk to start using Slack for a project and decide you like or don't like it. But within a health system, when you're talking about people's lives and a bunch of different roles and investments in the company, probably there's a big blast radius. Now, one of my observations is that, there's this graveyard of companies that did create medical devices or wearables. And at the end of the day, they're gone because no one would ever actually use those devices. So what we've spoken to many entrepreneurs who are kind of flipping that grassroots adoption model, which is, hey, let's get the consumer to adopt the device, adopt the program. Maybe they're a caregiver, and they're going to drive the demand at the end of the day back towards the health systems, who probably still will be a big part of the business model. Yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, of
Yeah,
these different styles of, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, some people, go to consumer market, but there is another side of this coin, and that is you have to invest a lot in consumer market. And if we're talking about medical device, you have to train people. Even to measure blood pressure, they have to be trained. And who buy blood pressure? People who are not technically savvy. They're elderly people, and you have to train. So what kind of team you have to keep to train each person separately? You can't. So consumer market for medical device is very complicated. It requires a lot of money. Did you pay attention that how much money any company consumer market raised? Take over, take other companies. Without money, I cannot do anything, and create demand from this market. It's almost impossible. So it's like lottery. So probability is less than you have to win in lottery.
Got it. Okay, so I want to ask two more questions on medical devices, and then want to move on because I think I could ask and learn from you all day about the devices. But as
Yeah.
far as that improved rigor, accuracy, safety of medical devices in the FDA clearance process, can you please outline for our audience a little bit, like what are the steps, how long it takes, and what I would tell myself 10 years ago if I was about to embark on this process?
Again, it's not straightforward. So people think, okay, I do something, I check back compatibility, I go for a whole checklist from FDA, I apply to FDA, and I'm done. No, it doesn't work this way. Because I think from my experience, 50% of your success in FDA, and we did something first in FDA, first device, it's who represent you in FDA. It's very important. How does he write the message to FDA? How to manage, he controls conversation with FDA. We call it consultant, FDA consultant. 50% of success, despite the fact you went for a whole clinical trial, successful, everything else is done. Now, this very important. So personality of your consultant. Second, who is in FDA you meet with? Whom? It could be some, I don't know, student 5 years ago who didn't find a job and working in FDA, who doesn't understand, cannot recognize the problems, or it's some mature guy who is 50, 60 years old, who is 40 years in FDA, and kick you out immediately because I understand all the bullshit you're going to apply. So also it's some lack or luck, depends.
Okay.
So a lot of things happen. So you have to think whom you have to work with, how you make the claims, who is responsible for your file in FDA. When you apply, try to apply to December, yeah?
Okay.
And check what will happen. So that's why we go to consultant from the beginning, from the first day, from the beginning of my company. I ask consultant, how do I have to build a company to go for FDA? First, I had the plan to be the first in FDA. How should I build my company?
Got it. And for clarity, when going through the FDA clearance process, it is I believe, as you've mentioned, for a specific claim. So, for example, Oxitone, SpO2, and the first one that's reading that accurately from the wrist, FDA cleared. How about for other things that a device may do? For example, let's just say sleep tracking, fall detection, respiratory rates. Which of those are either the same FDA clearance or not under FDA at all? And yeah, how do you navigate that?
True, I don't know yet.
Okay.
Now we're preparing all documentation to apply for FDA for respiration rate and blood pressure in line. And we are working with our consultants very close about how to apply. So all device has FDA clearance. So we don't have to clear a device. We didn't change anything. What we changed, just we added some algorithm on the FDA cleared data already above that enable to measure pulse and other vital signs. So how do we apply? Like Apple for the algorithm? Or because we have FDA clearance for whole device, we cannot do this. We have again to apply for whole device. So we decided to apply separately for respiration rate, and then we will see what will happen.
Okay, got it. And then for these software components, like for example, let's say there's something that runs that's not on the watch, or sorry, the wearable, and it is interpreting the data and correlating it with a real medical usage. Um, what are those lines as far as the hardware over here and the software over here that's meant to work with this device that would trigger two different thoughts of FDA clearance or two different pathways, or is it kind of treated as the same now, like the hardware and the software?
This is the problem with FDA because themselves they don't understand exactly how to deal with this. Because you're right. For example, you have the full platform. You have the index that could give you some data about event with your heart event. You have some index. You build this index based on machine learning and other stuff. And you have FDA clearance for this index. Now, what is the input? Can I use Apple like an input? Or I have to use Oxitone like an input? So a physician decides by himself what he's going to use to have to use this index for his medical goals, outcomes. So it's not clear today, and we are in transitional state. We are transitioning towards digital health, and it requires change a lot of fundamental basics of the healthcare approach, of the healthcare measurements. And this is what happens today. So we're living in very interesting time where this transition happens, and it creates a huge opportunities for innovation. Huge. Just you have to follow what happens and not to be in a place and time too early and not in the right place. You have to be in the right place, in the right time. That's why you have to follow what happens and watch this ping pong in the market for healthcare devices, medical devices market.
I can't wait to read more of your thoughts as they're synthesized into the book. And I really appreciate your time on this podcast. You've been very generous for many conversations now, and appreciate your expertise, guidance, and yes, asking the right questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Bimal. I'm really happy to talk to you guys.
Thanks for listening to this podcast and being a part of this movement. This podcast is brought to you by Persimmon Health, an offering by Leapfrog Technology that's purpose-built to help innovators imagine, build, and scale digital health products. We're passionate about fixing healthcare and have worked on over 50 digital health products. If you want to share your story or want to work together, please shoot an email to hello@persimmonhealth.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.